I'm thrilled to be with Dominica McBride today. She is Dr. McBride, and she's a leading thinker of how we evolve beyond the current racial paradigm. She's the founder and leader of Become, which values relationships, research, and restoration. And these are essential to transforming our society. There's so much that Become does, and it's as a culturally responsive valuation champion, grassroots advocacy strategist. Dominica does so much to really bring to light the value of people and that we already have within ourselves to figure out solutions that can move us toward our goals. Dominica is also the author of an important book, and that's called Becoming Change Makers: The Exquisite Path to Leadership and Liberation for Women of Color. There's so many beautiful things about this book, which we'll talk about. She has a PhD in counseling psychology with a specialization in consultation from Arizona State University. Thank you, Dominica, for being here. I'm so grateful to you.
It's great to be here with you.
So, Dominica, let's start with your upbringing because I'm curious about how your roots, your identity helped shape this career path.
Yeah, so like all of our stories, my story starts before I was born. So my mom and her side of the family is from Haiti, and my grandpa was pretty high up in the military in Haiti. And when Duvalier came into, or was trying to come into power in Haiti, he threatened all of the people that were with the previous administration, including my grandpa, because he was basically like assistant of the president in the military at that time. And even to the point of like the Duvalier and his people came to my grandma's restaurant. She had a little restaurant on a hill in Port-au-Prince. And they said, when Duvalier becomes president, like, we're coming for you. And my grandma, she's from France, and with her little French self, like, whatever, we're staying here, we're not going anywhere, like, get out of here. And then later on, she hears on the radio, Duvalier president, and she's like, we gotta go, we gotta get out of here, let's go to America. Eventually, I mean, it didn't quite happen immediately, because my grandpa was pretty committed to Haiti, but eventually they did end up coming to the United States with their children. So my mom is one of four, and I figured that something like this conversation happened where they're like, okay, we experienced very traumatic time in Haiti. What is the most opposite place we can go? Michigan. So they ended up in Michigan, which is like, as far as climate, total opposite. As far as like culture, very different than Haiti. Ended up in Michigan. My mom was 10 at the time. And eventually, I came into the world in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and was raised from the time of 10 on in a small town, small rural town in Michigan called Leslie. And there experienced some really great things around community, really close-knit community, people sharing, people taking care of each other, and then also some really hard things about community, just blatant racism throughout my childhood, and dealing with that. And so that really opened my eyes to the power of community in positive and negative ways, and really shaped my path on focusing in on community for healing, especially healing things around structural racism.
Dominica, this story of your family's roots in Haiti and then moving to Michigan, which I agree with you, are very, very different places. And also having the beauty of a close-knit community, but then also at the same time experiencing the opposite here of real racism. And you had mentioned when we talked earlier that you had even had the KKK. as part of your upbringing? Could you just bring to light what, I mean, I just wanted to share, we were talking about polar opposite of community, love, and helping each other, but also experiencing hardship like the KKK. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the Grand Dragon of the KKK, the home of the Grand Dragon of the KKK, was 45 minutes from Leslie, and so uh, that that placement and those kind of tensions were there too. And fortunately, I didn't experience anything to the extent of lynching or life threatening things that people had experienced for so long in our community in the South and beyond. But those tensions were still real around relationships in the community. So just one example is when I was 13, I was walking home from school, and I was walking in a path that I had walked every day home from school. And this particular day, I was walking past a home of this boy that we were friendly, and I would have considered him to be somewhat of a friend. You know, we would say, "Hey, how you doing? Good to see you." You know, when we would pass. And then this particular day at his house, he had a group of boys, some of them older, some of them the same age as us. And some of them I had seen before, some of them I hadn't seen before. But as I was walking by, one calls out nigger, and then another one, and another one. And then they all start yelling nigger, nigger, except for the boy that was friendly. And he just stood there silently, which is still painful that he didn't, do anything to intervene. And at that time, I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should shout back or, if I should run. And so I just was silent and just kept walking. And when I got home, I just basically fell into my dad's arms crying. And so situations like that happened and really shaped my path around wanting to use relationship and community as a vessel for healing. Because those sorts of things, whether it's things like racism or it's things like violence, like happen in community, in relationship. And that's also a space that we can heal, because positive healthy relationships can be amazingly profoundly healing physically, mentally, emotionally, in our lives. And so using that as a vessel for equity and liberation and love and unity became my goal.
The historic, I mean, even from Haiti to Michigan and to the work now, just the consistent theme of trying to find safety, love, validation in the people you're with, in your family, in your neighbors, your people you go to school, at work. It is right. We don't just separate, here's my personal life and here's my work life. We can actually bring those two together. And that's a bit of a myth, right? It just, you can't bring them together. You're not, strong. Like, why are we talking about love in this work environment? Do we really have to be best friends? Like, can't we get the work done? And yet you're actually going to say, to get the work done, we must actually see each other and recognize our humanity. And
Yes.
that talks about healing. And it's a bit of an oxymoron. I just want to draw the attention to that because it does feel like, well, obviously, but yet it's not so obvious in the work environment. And so that's why, the work that you do with Become is so powerful, because the solutions, right? If I were to, hire you to help me with a problem in my nonprofit, you'd say, well, we're not going to actually just going to give you a PowerPoint, right? With here are all the answers or the best practices based on research and white papers. We're actually going to look to your community. So I'd love to could you give us a quick overview of how do you bring this to life at the workplace? Because I know you get hired from many different organizations. What does it mean to say relationships, healing, the solutions are there? Like, could you give us an example of what that could look like?
Yeah, I'll give you an internal and external example of this. And it's interesting that you brought this up. This is a conversation that my team and I just had last week about like the tension of healing and love and relationship, like in the quote unquote workplace, right? Spirituality, or like do these things belong in the quote unquote workplace? And I'm like, absolutely. Like we are human, and healing and spirituality, or the unseen love, is an example like that comes with us. All of our different types of experiences around those things, they come with us everywhere. It's not like we walk through one door and all of a sudden our past doesn't exist, or our feelings about things or our opinions don't exist. They're still there, and there's always opportunities for healing. Healing can look like laughter. It doesn't always have to look like pain and digging in. I mean, of course, that's one aspect of it, but it can also look like joy and laughter and affirmations with each other, and time with each other, and profound connection with each other, right? And that should take place anywhere and everywhere as possible. And in order to create beloved community outside, we have to be inside. There's no way to create something else that you are not living into or growing into. And so, one example of just like one small example of like having connection and healing and like honoring our humanity in the workplace is the check-in that we do. Like we do check-ins at the beginning of every meeting, and check-outs at the end of every meeting. And oftentimes we're asking, how are you arriving? In this moment, right? Like even us in this conversation before, there are things that happened this morning that were hard, that were difficult, and it came with me in this moment, right? And so we share like, oh, I'm sad right now, or I'm good, I'm celebrating this great thing that happened. Like we just had one team member he was a part of a project that won a Pulitzer Prize, with another organization. And, that was something we all celebrated, in the moment, because he was coming in with joy, and sometimes other people are coming in with hardship, and they're coming in with pain or real-time trauma, and so honoring, like creating this space to honor the human experience that everybody's coming in with, like that it has been healing for people, for us to be able to say, no, we care about you and care about the relationships in this organization and in the work. And we oftentimes bring that to our work with other organizations too, to do a check-in, to develop relationships, to have time to really get to know each other in a human to human way, have those connections. Like in research around cancer prognosis, there's been some research around relationships and prognosis, and just simply a nurse calling for 20 minutes to check on a patient and say, how are you doing, has affected the prognosis of that patient, their treatment, their health, their well-being. The same thing has gone for we're part of this collaborative called Courage to Love, and it's about infant mortality and creating healthy moms and babies, especially Black moms and babies, because there's a racial disparity in infant mortality around Black and white. And now we know that part of that disparity is because of the effects of racism on our bodies and weakening our bodies, and then also affecting our babies' bodies too. And part of the antidote to that is love and supportive relationships and strong relationships and building that. And so that's one of the projects that we're helping to lead with a number of other organizations in one of the neighborhoods here in Chicago called Auburn Gresham. And we've worked together to bring community members together, and they start working closely together in community. Like we do the check-in together, we learn together, we grow together, we affirm each other. And then they went out and did interventions on their block for social cohesion, to build relationships on their blocks. And so, really creating this ripple effect, like these fractals, right? Like how can we create a loving, warm, authentic relationship, the two of us, and how can we create in a small group, like create relationships among us, and then how can then ripple that out and make it bigger and bigger in the community.
Oh, so beautiful to see how this orientation of love can be as small as a check-in when we arrive, and as the ripple effect, how it can go beyond not just two, but a group and then the community. And it really can be this integration of our full human selves with all the different emotions and history, and yet if we don't do this ourselves, how can we possibly think of unity for the future? So how do we model it? Dominica, when we think about your book, Becoming Changemakers, The Exquisite Path to Leadership and Liberation for Women of Color, you and I share a passion for racial justice and particularly women of color. As women of color, I know that your book has 4 themes to support women of color, and those 4 themes are healing, relationships, owning our power, intersectionality. And I can see how so much of even what you shared earlier has to do with not just all people, but particularly women of color, because how are we going to show up in the world and be able to have this transformation without actually recognizing that we have power within ourselves and we can be the change. I know it sounds so trite. We can be this change. And so I want to talk deliberately because this piece, I hear a lot about relationships and power and healing, but this point in your book, Dominica, about intersectionality, I want to talk about that because there's a beauty in all of our identities. And often we don't talk about that specifically for leadership. So can you talk about why, of all the different themes, I definitely understand relationships, healing, owning your power. Why did you decide to lift up this specific theme?
Yeah. So the lessons learned in the book came from a series of research and evaluation projects that we did with different programs for women of color leadership development, from philanthropy, nonprofit leadership to community organizing, with Chicago Foundation for Women, this program called Cultivate, and Public Allies. And through the work, no matter what area it was, whether it was philanthropy, whether it was nonprofit, whether it was organizing, women brought up these themes that were integral on their path in making change, in leading, in becoming who they have become. And intersectionality was one. Like, for example, one woman had said, this is a Black woman, she said, white women don't have to think intersectionality, but we die if we don't. And so intersectionality, coined by Kimberlé Crenshaw, is the intersection of our cultural identities, and oftentimes creates compounded oppression in this country and in other places as well. So it's a way to look at our experience in society, and a way for us to be able to develop like intervention in our own lives and in society, because being a Black middle-aged woman has a very different connotation to it and experience to it within society than being a young gay white man, right? Like there's some tension, in both, but the experience is very different for both of them. And so intersectionality brings those different cultural identities into context. And then the other piece that I like to think about with intersectionality is the positive elements too. Like, there's so much that we can grow in, learn in, celebrate in our different cultural identities, right? And so for example, I started the conversation with my Haitian background. I'm very proud of my Haitian background. I like it is a source of celebration. While of course it comes with a lot of challenge, it comes with a lot of historical trauma. It also comes with a lot of historical triumph in that too, and bravery and resilience. And so like that's something to be celebrated, and that's something that like I celebrate. And so thinking about the different ways that culture has influenced our personalities, our decisions, our actions, can also help to learn more about thyself, right? Like, know thyself as being that what a core piece of wisdom that is just timeless. And so looking at our intersectionality helps us to know ourselves even better. And it also helps us to shape who we want to be, right? There's some things that, like, value systems that we've adopted just because we've been taught that. Like, growing up in the United States, individualism is such a big value, and we're taught that through the way that classrooms are structured, the way that the workplace is structured, through the way that like media says like this is how you succeed, you know, you do it on your own, or you quote unquote pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like being a value. And that is just wrong in so many ways, and it's destructive in so many ways. And even like with Black women, like the ways that we have internalized that to take on so many things, to be the superhero, you know, in our lives, or to have Black girl magic, quote unquote, that becoming very weighty. And oftentimes we can get sick because of it, right? Because of like the stress, the weight of that, right? And so looking at our intersectionality can help us to see ourselves more clearly, can help us to see society more clearly, help us to be more intentional in our own lives as well as in our leadership.
There is so much juiciness to what you shared, Dominica, and I'm trying to cull together the points that I'm taking away for myself when I think about the power of intersectionality to become a change maker. And first, it's to realize that we have different experiences, even in the same context, different experiences based on our identity. And so that based on sexuality, gender, race, age, all of these things, include, that's just to name a few, we will show up in a situation experiencing differently. So that's the first reason why intersectionality is important. Second, it's know thyself, and that there's so much power to parts of our identities that sometimes don't get the attention that it deserves. For you, your beautiful Haitian background, for me being Filipina, I know that I not just denied that part of me, that cultural part of me, but I was embarrassed because I didn't realize that, one, I didn't know much about it, and second, that it could be a source of power and strength. And so like you, I'm very proud of where I come from, and that being Filipina is definitely part of my identity. And the third is that if we don't look at why there are stereotypes and that those don't have to be how we define ourselves based on society, as a Filipina, as a woman, that I can't lead, that I'm not athletic, I guess I'm good at math, that actually I can redefine for myself. Yes, actually I can lead, I am strong, and yes, I'm also good at math. These are all true. And so I love so much that intersectionality allows us to get to know ourselves better, allows us to choose who we want to be, and that does help us to become the change. Because where is that taught, right? You and I both went to great, university. You have a doctorate. I mean, where was it taught that we could source power not just from tools and knowledge and more papers, but actually from ourselves? So I love so much that we have. It's this quote. I want to share it because it's so powerful. As I was learning about you and your organization, by Lao Tzu, and I'm going to read it here and get your thoughts on it, Dominica. This quote by Lao Tzu that says, "Go to the people, live with them, love them, learn from them, work with them, start with what they have, build on what they know. And in the end, when the work is done, the people will rejoice and they will say, we have done it ourselves." Dominica, I want you to talk about, I mean, this is kind of one of the lead quotes on your Become website, and reflect on, for you, why that quote has significance, and particularly for women of color, why that has significance.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you are good at this. You are good at this. The way that you were just able to pick the fruits from that and reflect it back is amazing. So that quote for us, to me, like reminds us of the power and brilliance that is within each of us, because we're taught in this country to go outside of ourselves. You need to get this product, you need to pay money for this service, you need to do this, like everything. Even the way that schools are taught, the teacher has all the knowledge, the students don't have any knowledge, they're just ingesting all of the knowledge from the teacher. right? And so many different aspects of the society tell us we don't have the answer inside of us. We don't have the thing we need inside of us. That's just not true. It's just a lie. It's just a lie. We are born with so much wisdom and beauty and brilliance and potential flowing through us. And a lot of times it's about having the reminders around us and having the conditions around us to remind us that we do contain so many different strengths and gifts, right? And having conditions around us that allow us and give us opportunity to bring that out and to be that, right? And so anybody from like a one-on-one conversation or one-on-one interaction, from an organization coming to service a community, from the leadership of the city or of the state or of the country, recognizing that people have power and people have talent, right? And y'all don't have to come in and give people the answer. It's really about like, how do we create the conditions for people to step in to their potential, to step into their answer. And I used to be a therapist and provided one-on-one therapy for children, adults, couples therapy, family therapy, and just saw some amazing transformations. Like the 16-year-old coming into my office, depressed, very low self-esteem, wanting to commit suicide, and at the end of our relationship saying he loves himself, and even like physically like looking different. A couple on the brink of divorce coming in at the end of our relationship, they're sending me a card, you helped us fall in love again. And so I'm not a miracle worker. I simply came with the philosophy that they have the answer in themselves, and we're going to together dig that answer out and apply it to their lives. And it works so many times. And that's what we do in community too. We do it in organizations and communities, and bring that wisdom of Lao Tzu to the situation so that we can reflect their power, we can reflect their brilliance, we can reflect their wisdom, and help to manifest it.
Dominica, before we go to lightning round, I want to ask you this question of conditions, because people listening might say, well, that sounds great. I see I have the power of the light. It's within me. Or you might read that, Marianne Williamson quote that's just so powerful. The light is within us. And I'm curious, Dominica, when you think of conditions for women of color, a daily practice, if you have any suggestions for how do you create the conditions within ourselves to remind us that we can source already the power within? What suggestions would you give us to say these practices could help remind you, as all societies telling us all the things, the movies and media, those magazines, TikTok is telling us all the things, come back to these reminders to source from within? What would you share there?
Yeah. So there's a lot of self-care tips out there now, and one of them is around affirmations, right? Like what's the language that you're using to talk to yourself? So that's one, of course, that's readily accessible, is the affirmation, like I am brilliant, I am loved, I am worthy, like and then another is to look yourself in the eyes every day. Like start the day, look in the mirror, look at yourself in the eyes, and just be with yourself, right? And not like some like 30-second thing, like spend a few minutes just like looking into your own eyes, looking into yourself, like getting connected with yourself. Yeah, it reminds us that we are here, we are real, we are human, and we can be there for ourselves too, throughout all this. And then another is journaling. It's so powerful to journal because so much comes out when we're writing our thoughts that wouldn't come out otherwise. I've had answers to long time questions, powerful questions that I asked myself, like the answers came through journaling, me just asking spirit, myself, my higher self, whatever it is, like me asking the question on paper and then the answer coming to it. coming through me on the page, and seeing that, the definition and path to healing came through that way. My even questions I had about my own marriage came through that way. And so journaling can be a really powerful tool to show that we are kind of conduits for the brilliance, and allowing that to come out, and we see evidence of that on paper.
Oh my goodness. I want to name that. There's a first, deciding who you are. Who are we? Those affirmations. Second is the practice of knowing that we can look at ourselves and see our beauty. Because how often do we do that? And third is the writing. Ask the question and get the answer. And that all of these practices can be daily practices.
Yeah.
Sight, with the sound, with the touch, all of it. So beautiful. Dominica, I'm going to incorporate the mirror one is going to be the challenge. I think I'm like, how often do I actually do that? There's this, whatever, 90 seconds, 2 minutes to fall in love. And it's part of it's looking at your partner and just staring at them. It's the most awkward thing. I don't know about it, but I'm in love with my partner, so perhaps it works. But I'm both like excited, but also a little nervous to do it. But I thank you for the challenge. It's a beautiful practice. I appreciate it. Dominique, are you ready for lightning round?
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Cooking or takeout? Climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
Climb a mountain.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
Yes.
How would you rate your karaoke skills on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Mariah Carey?
0.
What's a recent book you read?
Right now, I'm listening to Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey.
What is your favorite way to practice self-care?
Yoga.
What's a good professional development you've done?
Fresh Academy, Fresh Speakers Academy. It's a thought leadership program that I recently completed. It's awesome.
What's your definition of a boss mama?
A boss mama? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. A leader in and outside the home.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Be fearless and step into love.
Where can we find you? Like LinkedIn, anywhere else?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Become's website, becomecenter.org. The website for the book is becomingchangemakers.com. And my email is dmcbride@becomecenter.org.
Great. And then last question is, do you have a final ask, recommendation, or any parting thoughts to share?
Buy the book, read the book, journey with other women in reading the book. We're helping with book clubs, with sisterhood circles, book talks. Recently facilitated an amazing session with a book club, a national book club, and it was really powerful. People shared in ways that they hadn't shared before, vulnerable with each other in ways that they hadn't been before, and it was very unifying and touching. So if you're interested in taking on the book for your book club or forming a sisterhood circle, reach out.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dominica, for all this beautiful stories and wisdom. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You have so much wisdom flowing through you, and such amazing talent.